lot of people liked the book massage, with me kind of talking about them. So I thought, okay, let me massage this and see if I can't recap the book. And I think this was published in 2015, so 9 years ago. So let's see how good I do. Let's see, the book starts with Caden Phillips, the main character. He's a cool kid, super popular, and everyone's freshman. The book starts at a party, and they're at a party, and they're all the cool kids, and his girlfriend is, I think, Jessica, and someone claims they saw Jessica kiss another guy, so he thinks she cheated. And so his friends, somehow they got a hold of beer as well. So they're drinking their first beers. So they're kind of not being smart. And he decides he's going to humiliate her at this party. So there's another girl who has a crush on him, and he's Mr. Popular. So he walks up to her and kisses her in front of everyone and his girlfriend. And his girlfriend, she runs away. So she locks herself in the bathroom, and he kind of feels bad, doesn't know if that's the way he should have gone about things, but he was convinced. So he goes on with his night and leaves her locked in the bathroom, and they just go and basically pass out. He wakes up in the morning to someone screaming, and he's super hungover, and he feels horrible and wonders why they would ever drink like that. So the scream, they go out, and he sees Jessica laying on the ground, pale, ghost white, dead. And he sees that she had overdosed. So she had killed herself at night. And then, so they call the EMS, and all the parents and all the police and the EMS come there, and the kids are all kind of huddled up. And his parents come to take him home. And as he gets in the car for his parents to take him home, he looks over and he sees Jessica standing in the neighbor's yard. And she looks like she looked on the floor. And she's just looking at him accusing, you did this to me. And then he kind of shakes his head, clears his head, and she's gone. But he can just still see her in his mind's eye standing there. So then, that's kind of the prologue. Then the book kicks off. His senior year. It jumps 3 years. Now he's a senior, and he's kind of a recluse. He's a shell. He's no longer Mr. Cool Guy. He suffers from anxiety, and so he's on anxiety medication to help him. And so he goes, kind of goes through his days, but he lives at home. He doesn't do anything outside of school. He goes there, is the bare minimum. And he comes home, and he stays home, and he kind of just stays in his room, reading books and playing video games. And he doesn't tell anyone because he doesn't want them to think he's crazy, but every once in a while he'll look somewhere, and he'll still see Jessica, and she's always accusing him. So that's kind of why he's on the anxiety medication. So then one day he's doing a book report, and there's this hockey player who's kind of picking on him, kind of picks a fight, and Caden, his main character, he starts having an anxiety attack, and he takes off running for his Xanax, his anxiety pills, and he gets stopped in the hallway by a couple of wrestlers who are just kind of loitering between classes, skipping class. And they try to stop him, but he's so desperate to get to his anxiety medication because he's having a full-on anxiety attack that he tackles the big heavyweight wrestler. And the other guy grabs his shoe. He makes it past them, missing a shoe, and he runs to his locker and he takes his anxiety medication. And a couple minutes later, the wrestlers, they show up with his shoe to tell him how good his tackle was and that he should consider coming out for the team. And over the next week, they harass him and kind of keep on Caden until he finally agrees that he's going to join them at a wrestling meet that weekend. So he meets these guys in the parking lot. He decides, okay. So they go to a non-school wrestling meet, a freestyle meet. And he goes there with them. And he fights his first match and he loses. But he liked it. And he gets to do another match. So it's a double round elimination. So his second match, I think he loses again. But his first match, he gets pinned. In his second match, he only loses by like a point. And when he gets pinned, he vowed he's never going to let himself be pinned again. So he comes home and he's kind of bruised and battered, but he feels really good. It's the first thing he's done in 3 years. And they tell him how the wrestling season is about to start and how he should join the actual high school wrestling team. And he decides that he's going to. Now, on the wrestling team, he comes in as a senior, but he's welcomed in with the freshmen. And meanwhile, I think another girl in their class kind of takes her own life. That's kind of the theme of what's going on, is for some reason this has a high rate in their school. So he becomes friends with, he starts kind of going to the wrestling meet. He kind of comes out of his shell a little bit. And so coming out of his shell, he kind of starts talking to people, and he gets acquainted with a girl in his class, and then he runs into Chloe, who is the best friend of the girl from his freshman year, Jessica. And she hates his guts. She blames him for what happened to Jessica. And so he wrestles and he joins the team, and he goes through an initiation where they pick nicknames for everyone. And he's slowly building his bond with these wrestlers and coming out of his shell, and he's getting better at wrestling. And his freshman best friend, who was at the party, who he's not friends with since that party, the person who talked him into insulting Jessica, is his weight in wrestling, and he has been varsity in that spot. And Caden coming in threatens his varsity spot. So he does not like Caden, and he's kind of upset that Caden's come back from the hole he crawled into. And so Caden goes on, and they just bond and they build, and the hockey players from the beginning kind of pick a fight with Caden, and the wrestlers that are with him back him up. So they kind of all stick together, and there becomes a team rivalry between the hockey players and the wrestlers. And so they go on, and Caden wins his first match by points, and then I think he keeps getting better each time he wrestles. He gets better, and when he goes home, he's kind of working out. He's like really just going all into wrestling, and that's becoming his obsession. And one day he realizes he left his anxiety medication at home for like the whole week, and he never caught on to it. So it's really like therapy for him. But then one day, one of his new girlfriends from class, she doesn't show up for class one day, and they find out that she went outside of town and jumped off a bridge, and that was it for her. So now he's like reeling with this, and like his anxiety comes back, and he's like leaves the classroom because it just hit him. He didn't know, like he expected to see her in the classroom, and instead he gets that news. So he's in the hallway, and he sees Jessica like blaming him again, and it's the first time he's seen her since joining the wrestling team. So now he's like having this anxiety attack. Everything's coming down on him all at once, and he's trying to get out of there. And I think in his desperation, he goes by a hockey player and like knocks the hockey player over, which he gets out of there, but the hockey player chases him, so it starts kind of like a real fight. So then once he calms down, the wrestlers and hockey players agree to meet in the parking lot of a grocery store in town. So they basically meet there one morning on a Saturday morning and just have a team versus team fist fight brawl. And both groups of guys just go out there and just have the worst fight ever, and everyone's beat up. And basically at the end of it, Caden has to drive his teammates plus like a hockey player or two in his truck to the hospital, and where there's a couple other guys sitting in the hospital, and there his mom shows up and is just so mad at him. But then Caden kind of moves on, gets back to the wrestling team. He keeps doing better, but now it's getting later in the year, but he's getting really good, and he wins the varsity spot. And this makes his friend just blow up and charge out of there. We'll call him James. His friend from freshman year was James, I think. So this makes James so mad that he just charges out of the wrestling room. And meanwhile, I forgot, Chloe is the manager for the wrestling team. So whenever he's at meets and stuff, he always interacts with her. And they've slowly built this. She's getting past her hatred, and there's kind of like a budding romance kind of going on. And she's slowly going from hating him to being like, okay, to like kind of a love interest kind of deal coming. Think like Pride and Prejudice, where like she can't stand Mr. Darcy, if that makes sense. And then by the end of it, it's like they're really coming together at some point. And it's like they realize they misunderstood each other, and they actually like shared in the tragedy as opposed to like him causing it. And so as the wrestling season winds down, they go to the state finals, and Caden goes into his match. And he basically wins his way into a state championship, and he's like on the mat with the state championship, and he wins the final match, and he sees Chloe, and she's so excited for him. She's like cheering, but then he looks past and he sees police like coming into the building, and like next to the police in one of the bleachers, he just sees like Jessica sitting there. And by then she's just horrifying, like a zombie basically. So like as he's looking through this crowd of people, he just sees Jessica, like the zombie, just sitting there watching him. And then he sees the door open, these police come in, and they come right down to the mat. And like as he's like getting first place state champion, like the police are coming and like put handcuffs on him. And Chloe is just horrified. And she's like, "It was you? Like you are a murderer?" And so gets hauled off to jail, and he's got no phone or anything, and he's basically like locked in this jail cell, and he starts having an anxiety attack, and he's still in his wrestling singlet, so he's like cold, half naked, and he just sees Chloe, or not Chloe, he just sees Jess, like the zombie, like, and the lights start flickering in the jail cell, and like water's just seeping down her, and like the floor is just filling with water. And then, actually, if I rewind, okay, at one point too, he's in the pool. Like, this is like 2 or 3 chapters before all this. They're training in the pool, and he swims down and he sees this ring just at the bottom of the pool, and he swims down to get it, and then he sees like Jessica's corpse, like as he's getting closer to it, like he closes his eyes and opens it, and Jess is under the pool, and he sees her, and he like blows his water, and he like comes to the surface like and then like he looks down, and there's no ring at all, there's no Jess, like it's just an open pool, and everyone's still like splashing around. So now he's in jail, and he sees Jess standing before this, and she's like pouring water. So then the lights flick on, and like the door opens, and his parents come. They're all worried, and they like have a lawyer, and they basically get him out of jail, and so he's free. And then he has his truck, and he's like, his parents go give him a change of clothes or whatever, and drop him off at his truck, which is in the parking lot of the state championship for wrestling. So it's like the last truck in a parking lot, and it's an empty school, right where earlier he had got the gold medal. He's got his cell phone, it's on like very low battery, and he's trying to call. He has all these voicemails from all his friends asking what went on, but then he has a voicemail from Chloe, who's just accusing him of being a murderer, and this whole time lying to him, and how she was just like disgusted. And so then he's like driving home, he's trying to call her, she won't pick up, and I think someone says they saw James pick her up, and he's like, James picked her up. And so he's driving home by himself, and he's going down the road, and all of a sudden he sees Jess like standing in the road, and he like slams his brakes, and she's just standing there in the middle of the road. And then at her feet is, well, so as she's standing in the road like full zombie, and his park is just in the middle of this road, in the middle of like a paved road, but it's woods all around. So it's just him and his truck with the headlights on her. And then all of a sudden the radio knob in his truck starts spinning, and the radio starts turning and like playing these songs about, you know, I need help kind of songs. And then so he looks, and at Jess's feet is a ring, and it's this ring that he saw at the bottom of the pool. And somehow he just knows like Chloe is at the pool and she's about to drown. So he just hits the gas and just flies right through Jessica, and he doesn't hit her, he goes through, she just disappears. And he races to the school, and sure enough, her car is outside of the pool. So he goes running in the pool, and she was with James, and no one can get a hold of James, and he just calls 911, but it's gonna be like 10 minutes. So he runs into the school, and the glass is already broken on the school, so it's like the door is open. So he kind of like sneaks in, and he comes in, and Chloe is unconscious laying next to the pool like she's been drugged. But then James is face down in the pool floating, and she's shocked. But there's a third person, and it's one of his other good buddies from the wrestling team, who's like basically masterminding all of this, and he's another wrestler. And so he basically comes and fights Caden, and he shoves Chloe in the pool, and she sinks to the bottom. So Caden is trying to fight this guy off and get Chloe out of the water. And so this whole fight is happening, and he eventually gets Chloe out, but she's unconscious, and he knocks the guy out. And so he's like on breath, and he's like, James is kind of, he got James too. Like James was long gone by the time he got there. So now he's just floating in this pool. And the cops show up, and he's trying to like give CPR to Chloe, and like the ambulance is giving CPR to Chloe, and he's just kind of like, all he can do is just kind of cuddle up to his knees and like try and process what happened. And then the next chapter kind of skips to an epilogue, which he's in class and he's doing a lot better, and he's like way more mentally healthy. It's kind of like a sunny day thing. So at the end of that chapter, like he's just like going through school, he's doing good, he's getting ready for college. And at the end of the chapter, Chloe steps up to the door of the classroom and like waves. And he decides, and she's like, basically like, let's skip class. And he's watching her, and he looks at the teacher, and the teacher's basically like, if you get up and follow her, you are in big trouble. You know, like, you can't just walk out of my classroom. He looks at the teacher and then looks at her, and he's like, she's worth the trouble. And then he like marches out, and they leave together. And that's where the book ends. And that's Takedown. From my memory. I mean, there's a lot more in here, but those are the main story beats that I can remember after 9 years later. I don't know, you seem to like the book massages and gripping, along with this.